Just from your own personal tastes and your memories of over the years with Fats Domino, do you have a favorite song, or could you pick a favorite Fats Domino song?
I think so. I guess I would go with "I'm Ready" because it just has such a great rhythmic drive, and the Fats just is I love a hard rocking sound, and that just goes so fast and so heavy, and Fats is just rocking almost as hard as Little Richard in that one to me. It's just pounding song, and if you listen to it, there's actually no horns in that. It's quite an amazing thing because they actually performed that on a Dick Clark show one time at that time in '59, and the horn players are just clapping their hands. So, I mean, it's just a driving song. I love that. And it's a rock and roll anthem, too, if you think about it. But as far as, wow. But he's had so many great hits, and the significance of them is just so great. I mean, Fat Man, Ain't That a Shame, Blueberry Hill, Walking to New Orleans, and Blue Monday, which, of course, is the song I titled the book at, and that book over, and is all of them have very great significance in their own ways.
Just from your own personal tastes and your memories of over the years with Fats Domino, do you have a favorite song, or could you pick a favorite Fats Domino song?
I think so. I guess I would go with "I'm Ready" because it just has such a great rhythmic drive, and the Fats just is I love a hard rocking sound, and that just goes so fast and so heavy, and Fats is just rocking almost as hard as Little Richard in that one to me. It's just pounding song, and if you listen to it, there's actually no horns in that. It's quite an amazing thing because they actually performed that on a Dick Clark show one time at that time in '59, and the horn players are just clapping their hands. So, I mean, it's just a driving song. I love that. And it's a rock and roll anthem, too, if you think about it. But he's had so many great hits, and the significance of them is just so great. I mean, Fat Man, Ain't That a Shame, Blueberry Hill, Walking to New Orleans, and Blue Monday, which, of course, is the song I titled the book at, and that book over. And that is all of them have very great significance in their own ways.
What is it you like about Fats Domino?
Well, I love that he is just, Fats is such a down-to-earth person. As I say, he doesn't really have any great ego. He just loves music, and he loves performing for people and making them happy. That in itself is just, you got to love that. That is such a beautiful thing. That he was able to put his enthusiasm, this almost childlike enthusiasm, into his music for nearly 60 years is an amazing thing. People just don't have that kind of drive and enthusiasm for music for the most part. He almost powered his way in, through rhythm and blues, and people thought, that's not something that, that most people wanted to do. He didn't care about if he was being too enthusiastic or that that people weren't used to that kind of a hard driving sound. He just wanted to play it, and he wanted to entertain people, and people caught on, and they loved it. That was just the kind of a youthful enthusiasm just driving through his music, and that's just the way Fats is. He's just a sweet, enthusiastic guy who just loves living and enjoying life.
I think the song that a lot of people most associate with Fats Domino, one of them is probably Blueberry Hill. Tell us about that song.
Blueberry Hill was an old pop song, and actually it was first recorded by Gene Autry for one of his singing cowboy movies in, I think, 1940. And shortly after that, Glenn Miller had a big #1 pop hit version of it with girls singing the song, if you can imagine that. And then probably the most significant version after that was Louis Armstrong's version in 1949. And Fats Domino had heard Louis Armstrong's version, and he loved it, but he really never knew the whole song. So luckily his brother-in-law, Harrison Verrett, who had played in a lot of New Orleans jazz bands as a guitarist and banjo player, knew the whole song. They were actually in Los Angeles at the time in the spring of 1956 when they tried to record the song. The fact that Fats didn't really know the whole thing contributed to the fact that they really were not able to get a whole take of the song. In other words, they would record the song, but they couldn't record it all the way through. They had to stop at various times. Dave Bartholomew was not too happy, actually, with the session because he knew that they had never completed a full take. He told Lou Chudd, who was the owner of Imperial Records, "Lou, I don't have nothing," when they went to dinner that night. But Lou Chudd heard it, and he said, "Well, it sounds pretty good. I think we can put it on as a B-side." Okay? So he had his engineer, was Bunny Robine at Master Recorders, studio in Los Angeles, edited it together from the different takes, and it came out all right, he thought. So he put it on the B-side of the song called Honey Child. And they actually released Honey Child, and we're promoting that when disc jockey said, wow, this song Blueberry Hill, and the other side, that's a great song. And so they actually had to flip it over and play Blueberry Hill, and of course it became the biggest record of Fats' career. I mean, it was just huge. Amazingly, Fats never had a number one pop hit, but Blueberry Hill did reach number two. It sold tens of millions of copies on its own, and is in the Grammy Hall of Fame and other legendary song classics. But certainly the song that people know best of all from Fats. And one thing that's kind of funny about it is actually the song was considered kind of risque. I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. As you ever watched the series Happy Days, you know that that's one thing that Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard used to say. I found my thrill whenever he was talking about girls, making out with girls.
You know, I was reading this interview that Dave Bartholomew did a few years back where he said that, you know, we just talked about Walking to New Orleans, but it's kind of interesting. There have been a number of Fats Domino songs with walk in the title. I'm walking. Have you ever seen a dream walking? And Dave said that Fats thought that song titles with walk in the title were lucky. Had you ever heard that before?
Well, I think he was saying that Fats thought they were lucky, and obviously, you know, they were lucky for him because it was, as you said, I'm walking, and then it did, I want to walk you home, and then walk into New Orleans, and that actually, those were three. I believe all three of those were number one R&B hits for him. So yeah, he definitely was lucky with that title, using the word "walk" in the title. And part of the thing, I think, you know, again, it goes back to the Fats had a rhythm in his songs, and a walking rhythm certainly fits "Walking to New Orleans" as it does fit "I Want to Walk You Home." But ironically, "I'm Walking" is almost at a galloping beat if you listen to it, so it doesn't sound like he's running almost, you know. That's kind of ironic, but specifically, "I'm Walking" certainly was one of Fats' biggest hits right after Blueberry Hill and Blue Monday. That has a huge rhythm, which was contributed to by the great drummer Earl Palmer, who is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an instrumentalist. And it's all really almost a jazz brass band marching rhythm in there. That they would play on the snare drum, and if you listen to it, it starts out with a bass prelude. They in the brass band parades, they would have a bass drummer, and then go into the snare drum, and so if you listen to it, he's playing both a bass part, which goes boom, 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 and then he goes into the two beat, which is "I'm walking, bump, 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 bump," you know. So it's really a driving rhythm, and it's not walking at all. But it sure was a huge hit. And of course, Ricky Nelson made it into his first hit just shortly thereafter. And ironically, you know, it's been recorded by a bunch of people. I think Hank Williams Jr. did it in the 70s, and then even Ella Fitzgerald, of all people, recorded it in the 70s. And it's actually become both a country and a jazz standard. It's amazing, you know, how far so many of Fats' songs have carried him.
Well, you know, I was also thinking it's interesting because, like we said, he had the walking in a few titles, in a few of his song titles, but also Blue. You know, My Blue Heaven, Blueberry Hill, Blue Monday. It's just kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's another point. Of course, you know, that relates back to you know, the blues. I would think that he would do a song with the word blue in it. But the thing is that, you know, Fats did some blues, but he always did almost always had some kind of a happy turn to most of his blues. He never did the extremely broken down blues. And ironically, the other two songs you're talking about there are actually Tin Pan Alley songs. My Blue Heaven was a huge hit in 1927, and Blueberry Hill from 1940. And so that really expanded Fats' audience at that time, because that was actually intentional, that he was recording some of those Tin Pan Alley songs, or in other words, the pop songs from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, that really expanded his audience, because adults really had no respect for rhythm and blues, and the fact that he did such a beautiful, exuberant version of these old songs, which the kids' parents knew, actually got the parents to buying these records. So it was a huge breakout for Fats. My Blue Heaven was the first, and then he did When My Dream Boat Comes Home, which was also a big hit, another Tin Pan Alley song, and then he capped off that little trilogy with Blueberry Hill, which of course was his biggest song of all time.
One of the other songs that he's most known for is Ain't That a Shame. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Ain't That a Shame was a very, very simple song, as anyone who has ever listened to it knows. And I got to say that that's kind of the difference between Fats' songwriting and Dave's songwriting, because Dave has certainly written a lot of simple songs, but that was kind of Fats' trademark, was to write very, very simple songs, very simple lyrics. And if you listen to Dave's songs, which are clearly his, like Blue Monday and I Hear You Knockin', and even One Night of Sin, there's a more elaborate storyline in there where he's talking about what happened to him in the course of the song. But Fats would just write simple nursery rhyme type things, and actually that's what Dave calls them to this day. Is like I'm Walking and Ain't That a Shame. Very, very simple one-line songs, or A Whole Lot of Lovin' for that matter, which I think only has about 20-something words in it. And, you made me cry when you said goodbye, ain't that a shame. So that's how Fats came up with that. He said because he saw a lady beating a baby in the street or something. And he said, ain't that a shame? He says, well, that could be a song. And they actually were out in Los Angeles in 1955, and they put that together in almost the same time that they recorded Blue Monday and another big hit of Fats called the All By Myself. The same, within 2 weeks of each other, they recorded all three of those number one R&B hits. Dave, I don't know, didn't know exactly what to do with it, but I guess he emphasized the beat. Dave and Fats were together on that mindset, was to always have a heavy, heavy rhythm. And so that was really, like I said, the big beat that was driving his songs along. So, after Fats said, you made me cry, he had the drums and all the instruments come in and say, bump, 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 And people had never heard a heavy, heavy beat like that before on pop radio in the 1950s. So you got to imagine that people were just astounded like that. I mean, people don't really think about that, about Ain't That a Shame these days, but it was almost a revolutionary type sound, almost like we think of as Tutti Frutti by Little Richard. And of course, Fats never screamed like Little Richard, but he had a heavier beat in some ways than Little Richard, or at least just as heavy. Of course, Little Richard recorded all of his hits in New Orleans and used a lot of the same musicians for that same heavy beat, and that's how he followed Fats into, popularity. Ain't That a Shame was very significant because it crossed over in July 1955, the same month. Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and the Comets became number one for over a month, and so they kind of were simultaneous shots of the revolution of rock and roll. Bill Haley had the biggest record of the year there, and Fats had the first record by a black man with a heavy beat in the top 10, and that was really the opening shots of the rock and roll revolution.